Let's now try and understand how India really fits in the entire global puzzle, and who better than a very special guest, Ben Powell, Managing Director and Chief Investment Strategist for APAC, BlackRock Investment Institute, joining in on the show right now. Ben, hi, great to have you today on ET Now. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Ben, I was just going through your recent note, and you're talking about as to how the world is shaped up by structural forces which are currently at play. There's AI, of course, right on the top. There's energy transition. There's the demographics at play. And of course, there's the whole rewiring of global supply chains. Tell me, how do these forces come together, and how does the, eventual puzzle really look like?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. Firstly, I would say the main point perhaps of these mega forces is that they result in a world which is very different from the world we were able to enjoy previously, sometimes called the Great Moderation. So we had a 10 or 15-year period after the global financial crisis where, at least in Western markets, inflation was low, interest rates were very, very low, and broadly markets did very well. That is now over, and these mega forces result in a much more complicated environment where we think investors need to adjust how they invest accordingly. It's not going to work just to be risk on and to be long the market. We think investors are going to have to navigate these mega forces much more intentionally, much more actively, and much more specifically in terms of picking exactly what risk you want in the portfolio, be that by asset class, be that by geography, or indeed by one of these specific mega forces.
Ben, everyone is of the view that what steam engine did to productivity, what internet did to e-commerce, what social media, what smartphone did to Uber, AI could have that kind of a far-reaching impact. What are your thoughts on the same?
Yeah, we think so. So at BlackRock, the world's largest investor, we are on board with AI enthusiasm, but we want to be careful, of course, right? So in the round, this is an extraordinary moment, maybe even in human history, where intelligence becomes accessible all over the world to more and more people over time. So obviously, this is unbelievably exciting, transformational moment. But I'm an investment strategist, so I should be less highfalutin and come back to practical realities and think about the investment implications. So for us at BlackRock, this is going to play out over 3 stages, lasting years, maybe even longer than this. Stage 1 is the foundational technology, the chips, the web service stuff, which is where a lot of the excitement has reasonably been over the last year or two. Where we're moving towards now in our assessment is stage 2, which is the building out of the broader ecosystem. So just for your reference, humans use around 25% of your calories you use for your thinking, for your brain. It's not exactly the same, but the silicon brain, the artificial intelligence, similarly needs an energy architecture. It needs data centers, it needs electricity, it even needs copper. So the implications for AI are not just the chips and the foundational technology, it's broader than that. And where our excitement, I think, at the margin is moving towards at BlackRock is toward that ecosystem. By the way, stage 3, I won't leave you hanging. Stage 3 should be the broader productivity gains that flow through from this potentially beautiful technology, but that will take time. That will come later. For now, we would be more focused on the build out itself and those companies and sectors that can benefit from the potentially very large investment that's going to be required into energy, real estate, utilities, as I say, even the copper wiring right down at the basic materials level, because for the moment, AI lives in the physical realm. So we'd be thinking about what physical sectors we can benefit from as investors as we build out the broader organism over time.
Ben, since you did speak about energy, that segment itself is going through such a huge transition, right? And everyone's sort of clamoring to find the fuel of the future and what the beneficiaries and the whole supply chain dynamics and ecosystem is going to look like. From an investment perspective, where do you think the biggest opportunity lies right now?
I think something worth thinking about actually goes back to the previous question is the electrification of everything. So we're seeing kind of a confluence of different events, AI with its huge energy demands requiring consistent electrical kind of supply. That's seemingly bringing back something of a nuclear renaissance. Very early days, so I don't want to overmake that point, but that seems to be an area which is something like required if we're going to make the most of the AI megaforce over time. We also have electrification of cars, led by China. I think it's fair to say we have more and more countries where electric cars are kind of moving from being a niche kind of object of curiosity to just a normal mode of transport. That's only going to continue. And then at the margin, the kind of crypto stuff as well, obviously, is also somewhat electricity and energy intensive. So what this means is, in the round, the planet is going to need a lot more energy over time. But we want to be doing that in a way that blends the needs of growth, GDP, employment, and household people's well-being, which obviously is very important. We're going to need to manage that as a society with the needs to try to keep the planet as green and even greener over time as we possibly can. That's going to be very complicated for politicians all over the world, something they're going to have to wrestle with. And I think for sure we'll throw out different investment risks and opportunities. And that's something at BlackRock we're monitoring very closely.
Okay. The other big word, which in a sense seems to be the center of attention for everyone, is ESG. And a lot of attention now goes to environment ahead of governance and social. This entire outlook for ESG-based investing, is it a fad or is it a real deal?
No, I think it's a real deal. So I think the way I would put it is, if you think about governance, going back 20 or 25 years, we had a few scandals in the US, Enron, all of that. And I think it became very clear back then, if people needed clarifying, that having good corporate governance was kind of not just a fad. It was very important if you're an equity owner of one of those companies. So I think E, S, and G are all extremely persistent, very important, but they need to be understood for what they are, which is, at least from our perspective, as the world's largest asset manager. We're not a politician, obviously. So from our perspective, they are investment risks. That's what they are. They're not somehow special or different. They're investment risks which have implications for share prices, both directly and indirectly, if you like, in terms of how government will adjust policy to try and move in a more, let's say, environmentally friendly way. So whether you're a kind of climate change believer or not is fine for one's personal belief. But as professional investors, if you look in the US and think about the Inflation Reduction Act, that's just real money flowing into the green sector, driving real economic returns and performance for shareholders and investors. So our lens on this is one of extreme pragmatism, energy pragmatism, and thinking about how E, S, and G impact investments, because they surely do. And so that's the lens we bring to bear on this space.
You mentioned that electrification and the way electricity consumption would move is the trend. So whether it is data centers, whether it is copper wires or pure transmitters. But I would just take it slightly forward, which is that what would be the preferred source of electricity generation? Will it be nuclear? Will it be wind? Will it be solar? Or it will still be thermal dominated?
That's the right question, I think. So I think it's going to be a blend of all of those. And what's going to be so interesting is different geographies. I mean, this is obvious, but it's true and important. I'm here in Abu Dhabi. So certain geographies, including the Middle East, have an abundance of sort of all of the above, right? So we have old-fashioned hydrocarbons, if you like. Clearly, we have a lot of sunshine. And what's interesting is there's also a very forward kind of thinking towards embracing nuclear. So I think there's going to be a blend of all of these, and country by country, the dynamics are going to be different as to what's available, what's affordable, and so forth. But I think this is something that politicians and therefore investors are going to be wrestling with. And the point is, I think, that if we are going to make the most of, if we can call it the intelligence revolution, back to your first question, we're going to have the energy supply to come through. So this is an urgent policy agenda. I actually think one thing we can say about the US election, whoever wins, both sides, I think, of the aisle are very focused on this. Just by the way, actually freeing up permitting to allow more energy infrastructure to be created in the US. And I think that is really speaking to your question here, the urgency around having the power generation permitted, because that's obviously an important impediment, or can be, and therefore allowing these kind of big hopes that we've all got around electrification to come through practically.
So now let's talk about what would be of your interest, which is that where do you think the blend of growth and valuation is there? The themes what we've discussed, Ben, you would appreciate that these are very widely tracked themes. A lot of money managers, including BlackRock money managers, they've already invested in them. So while we've spoken about some powerful themes, where do you think from an investor standpoint, and which theme do you think still offers a good investment proposition?
I'm sorry to say, but I think all five, I love all five of my children, all five of the mega forces equally. I think they are going to persist for years and decades to come. So I still think there is a lot of wood to chop in each of these mega forces. And importantly, of course, where they go day by day, week by week, we can debate and is important. But we think these can be a mainstay of portfolios over time and can actually help investors navigate some of the short-term noise and news flow, which of course can be very important day by day, week by week. But we mustn't let the short-term news flow kind of obscure, in our judgment at BlackRock, these mega forces, which are really going to be your friends to be swimming with these respective tides, in our assessment, over the years ahead. So we would still be very much saying, don't miss the point. These are mega forces. They're going to persist for years to come. And swimming with this tide rather than against it, we think will pay dividends for investors, even though, as you rightly say, demographics you can think of as the most obvious, right? Demographics is pretty well mapped out for years and decades to come, but markets don't do a good job of kind of discounting that until somehow we get there. So I still think these mega forces, even though they are, you're quite right, well discussed and seemingly well understood, I think they're still a source of portfolio returns for investors for years to come.
These four mega forces, Ben, would obviously need financing. But the question really is, what's the future of finance itself going to look like? And how is it that investors can benefit out of it?
I think that's absolutely right. So capital, kind of the need to mobilize capital and fund all of these aspirations is the practical reality. So I think something we're going to see more and more of all over the world, but particularly, I guess, in the West, where they have quite or relatively constrained fiscal positions. There's quite a lot of debt in various Western countries. So I think you're going to see government more required, I suppose, just from a balance sheet perspective, required to reach out to partners, trusted partners on the capital side, to bring private capital to the party. And I think we're going to see more and more tie-ups between governments, obviously critically important in terms of legal framework, regulatory permissions, and societal kind of buy-in. This is critical, of course, a partnership between governments and private capital, because many Western countries don't have so much fiscal firepower themselves. So leveraging private balance sheets, we think, is something we're going to see more and more of in the West and perhaps elsewhere.
In the light of fintech and new finance firms getting created, how do you see AI and technology changing the future of retail financing, consumer financing? Because that's where I guess large technological disruptions have happened. You know, I frankly can share my experience. I don't know, Ben, when was the last time I went to a branch? I don't know about you.
No, that's right. Technology marches on day by day. So here at BlackRock, one of our favorite technologies is ETFs, just as an example. So ETFs have allowed, I think, a substantial increase in the democratization of access to capital markets. It's allowed moms and pops, households to be able to access the fruits of capitalist growth in a way that a generation ago really would have only been straightforward for bigger institutions. Now, to your point, at the click of a button, one can access ETFs and get exposure to any of the mega forces I've just mentioned and almost anything else you can imagine. So this is kind of amazing, and I think is only going to continue. So I think we're all hoping that the efficiency of capital markets and the ability for more and more people all over the world to access the benefits of capitalism, being able to fund unexpected health challenges, fund their pensions, fund their school fees, whatever it might be. Hopefully, more and more people are going to be able to do that. And if I may say so, just speaking as a humble foreigner, India is surely at the forefront of that, having seen something like 100 million people now in India become investors, many of those relatively recently. There's still 1.3 billion to go, I guess, over time. So we shouldn't be too optimistic. And of course, there will be stops and starts, maybe some complications along the way. But as a capitalist, I'm excited to see that there is more access and more availability for more and more people all over the world to be able to tap into the benefits of the genius of certain companies and their leaders, benefiting all of us over time.
5 themes as your favorite, Chinal, but if I insist on picking up one out of those 5, and this time I would literally, let's say, put a gun to your head and insist, Ben, you have option to pick one. Which one would you pick?
Okay, I will answer.
There's a gun to your head, sir. There's a gun to your head. Remember, there's a gun to your head. There's a gun to your head.
I think it has to be artificial intelligence. This is just an extraordinary moment. Intelligence is not like the other commodities, right? We're talking about the ability to think and solve problems in a general sense. This will take time, right? So we need to be pragmatic and realistic and appropriately calm. But I think a degree of excitement is appropriate as we think about all of us being able to deploy more intelligence. So we have our limited biological substrates here in-house, if you like, but we're all over time going to be able to access the silicon substrates and have more intelligence, and that will be useful whether you're booking a holiday or whether you're a government trying to run a very complicated nuclear power plant. So I think the democratization of intelligence over time is very exciting for investors, and if I may say so, is also a very exciting moment for humanity in general, with likely very significant consequences. So if you put a gun to my head and make me sort of highlight one, it's hard not to choose artificial intelligence because it is, I think, such a big deal in every dimension.
Okay, this time there is no gun to your head. I am putting the gun back, and then we'll talk about India, which is that where do you see India moving? In India, all of us are excited about the demographics, about productivity gains, about stable government. But from your standpoint, when you look at India and you have options to choose between India and other countries, where does India stack up?
Very highly. So when I think about my favorite megaforces, all 5 of them, India really comes to mind straight away across all 5, actually. So just to highlight, of course, what's going on today, we have the BRICS meeting up in Russia, and we have, really quite extraordinary scenes of Prime Minister Modi embracing President Putin, sitting down with President Xi. Reportedly, this hasn't happened yet, but reportedly Prime Minister Modi will be sitting down with President Xi later today. So India seems to be in a really amazing position where on the one hand, it is a cherished partner of the BRICS, with huge positives, obviously energy and other dimensions on the one hand. And on the other hand, India, of course, is an absolute cornerstone of US policy, most obviously through the Quad. So you have a very interesting position where I suppose on net, we can say a more complicated geopolitical world is a little bit scary and is probably a net negative for the planet as a whole. But you need to be more nuanced. You need to be more specific. And when I think about a country like India, if they play the game skillfully, and I think we can say so far this is the case, has an ability actually to benefit from some of the geopolitical complexity, which for sure is causing worry, but also maybe can create opportunity for those countries which are skillful and flexible enough to navigate what is a complicated environment. So I'm extremely interested to see what is going on at the BRICS summit today and how India can continue to very carefully, right, is a very delicate situation, but how India can continue to navigate this very interesting, complicated geopolitical backstory.
Absolutely, Ben. Such a pleasure having you today on the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
There comes a time when your heart calls for you to arise. Plant your feet solid into the ground. Decide your own limits. And then break right through them. Become something more. It's my time to rise.